I just read that sentence and I already knew that he was going to have some marital problem with his wife or something, because what's up everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Orlando Martel and this is Martel Dynamics. Today we're going to be chapter 5 of Breathe, which is Steel Sharpens Steel. Last chapter we ended up talking about Rickson Gracie's brother's death, one of his bigger brothers, Holz, and naturally this chapter starts right there. So without further ado, let's get going. So after Holz's death, according to Rickson Gracie, that was the moment when the family began to split. Literally, the first sentence of this chapter is, the first significant split in the family came when it was time for Holz's widow, Angela, to decide who would take over his academy. Although my father wanted it, she gave it to Holz's brother, Carlos Jr. instead, and he would soon emerge as my father's biggest jiu-jitsu rival. We have to recall that academy started because some of Rickson's cousins didn't like the way Helio taught jiu-jitsu and they had another vision and whatnot, but mostly because they didn't like Helio's style. So they made their own academy, and now Holz's academy got sold or given to other brother Carlos Jr. Now this academy is taking jiu-jitsu to not another level, but I would say that they took jiu-jitsu, they interpreted jiu-jitsu in another way. I think, if I recall correctly, that Carlos Jr. is the one that started sport jiu-jitsu or something like that. And long story short, what ended up happening is that as they took jiu-jitsu more of a sport and not as a self-defense mechanism, they organized this big event, this big fight. They brought King Zulu back, and this again was a luta libre fight, but nobody wanted to challenge King Zulu, even though Rickson had already beaten him. I mean, that was a 1 in a million kind of thing, you know what I mean? Nobody wanted to fight with him. Rickson says, at first I wasn't interested in fighting King Zulu because I had already beaten him. Above all, I was curious to see who would step up and accept the challenge. I was hoping that a tough lucha libre fighter like Denelson Maya or a kickboxer like Flavio Molina might answer the call. Someone had to defend Rio's honor, and there were plenty of fighters who could. I figured that it was just a matter of time before one of them announced that he was fighting Zulu. 3 weeks later, silence. Not one fighter from Rio stepped forward. It was like a giant swell had hit the coast and everyone was pretending that there was no waves because they were afraid to paddle out. So what ended up happening is that because nobody, stepped forward to challenge King Zulu, the promoters, Rickson says, came directly to him and asked him to fight King Zulu again for the price of, or sum of, $5,000. So Rickson accepted the challenge. At this point in Rickson's life, as we saw in the last chapter, he has already met Orlando Canny. He has already gotten to this spiritual, emotional point in his life where he doesn't fight anymore just jiu-jitsu. He fights in another level. He's just in this special state of mind where it's like he's not fighting the fighter, he's fighting the whole universe. You know what I mean? At least when I was reading this, it was no surprise that he beat King Zulu again. And this is where things start to go, I'm not gonna say downside or wrong. It's just life, man. It's just, you are young. I mean, Rickson in this case, he's young, he wants to fight. He wants to do a lot of shit in his life. But at the same time, you have this dilemma or this dichotomy that you want to have a family too. And that's something I think about every single day. Me specifically, I am very ambitious. I want to do a lot of shit. I want to grow in a lot of shit. But I want to have a family. And those things, unless pardon my innocence or let's say naiveness in this topic, but unless you have a wife that supports you unconditionally, man, this is not the first book I read where the man began to have problems with his wife at this point in their lives. Look, I'm just gonna read it and you'll interpret it. Not much changed in my day-to-day life. I kept teaching, training, competing in jiu-jitsu, and raising my son. I was convinced that he was going to be just like me. Even as a tiny child, Rickson was intense. Rickson is his first child, okay? Incredibly coordinated, focused, and nimble. So at this point, Rickson is 21 years old. He's already famous and his first child was born, right? Here's where things get tricky. Rickson's birth did not change the way I led my day-to-day life. I left our apartment at 7 in the morning and taught and trained until 10 at night. So look, I read this and I didn't even finish the chapter when I was reading it. I mean, of course I finished the chapter, but at the point when I was reading it for the first time, I just read that sentence and I already knew that he was going to have some marital problem with his wife or something, because I mean, you leave the house at 7 a.m. and you come back at 10 at night. I mean, you're basically ignoring the family, your family. You're ignoring your wife, you're ignoring your children. You're not there at all. You're not even there to support your wife. I mean, I'm guessing, I don't want to assume anything, but as I have finished the chapter, I'm guessing that he got back home so tired that he basically came to sleep. It's no wonder to me that this caused problems, because as we have read till this moment in the chapter, he got married to Kim because they fell in love. They fell in love and they got married. In my opinion, and disclaimer, this is only my opinion, being in love, falling in love, that's not a reason to get married. Not just that. In a marriage, you interchange things, not material things, but I'll give you this, you'll give me that. Let's say a man, I'll give you protection. You'll give me support. I'll give you stability. You'll take care of the children. You know what I mean? But when the thing is only one-sided, that causes problems in my mind. Or when this deal is not, written or paper or just talked, when you haven't talked to your wife about how you want to run things in the house, or how you want things to go or run, or I don't know, when you don't talk to your wife how you want things to be dealt with in your marriage, bro, what can I say? You're just stupid. You're just stupid if you think that you won't have problems. Look, I don't see any problems if he wanted to live like that, even when he was married and with children. But he had to talk to his wife about it. What can I say? He didn't, and what happened? Naturally, he had problems. Look, I'm getting carried away. I'm just gonna read what Rickson says. I could still go to the beach in the middle of the day and surf with my friends and do many other things that my wife could no longer do. Kim began to get frustrated, and for the first time, some friction began to enter our relationship. For me, he could have seen this coming a huge mile away. So at this point in history, the lucha libre guys were looking for ways to beat jiu-jitsu, because whenever somebody who trained in Gracie Jiu Jitsu came to fight a lucha libre guy, they always got their asses handed to them. So what ended up happening is that famous lucha libre fighters combined lucha libre with Thai boxing. This mixed, maybe not beat jiu-jitsu, but instead of them having their asses handed to them, what happened was that matches began to become draw, and it was 50-50. They thought of that as a win. 1984, Rickson has his second child, which was a girl. He says, although my and Kim's relationship remained tense, she got pregnant again and had our second child in 1984. A beautiful baby girl we named Kawan. Problems became bigger and bigger and bigger. He says that I was gone training and teaching most of the time. As much as she loved our children, motherhood was a hard transition for her. And again, I'm not a father. I'm not married. There's only so much I can talk about, but what he's talking about, if there's no communication, everything's doomed. You don't have to be married to know that. And even though their problems got bigger and continued, 1986, he got her pregnant again. He says in 1986, Kim gave birth to our third child, a second daughter we named Colleen, who was more like Rickson than her older sister. And to make matters awkward, at least in my mind, and they are not that awkward, it's just in my mind painful for him to go back and see these pictures. You get what I mean. Despite the strains in our marriage, my children brought me great joy. When American fashion photographer Bruce Weber came to Rio to take pictures of Brazilian athletes in 1986, he heard about me. Basically, this photographer began taking pictures of Rickson Gracie, which you can see all over the book. For example, 2 pages behind the one that I'm reading, there's this picture of Rickson and Rickson Gracie in Copacabana. I'll put it up in the video. He says that it was not hard for us to pretend to be the perfect family. Kim and our children were beautiful. I was a successful athlete, and from the outside, our family looked ideal. The truth was less kind. These are other pictures: Kawan, Kim, and Rickson at Rio. The one next page is just him doing funny faces. And the last one presented is Kawan and Rickson Gracie in 1988 as babies. So because the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Academy, began splitting even more, there was Helio's Academy, there was Carlos Jr.'s Gracie's Academy, family problems got even bigger. And there came a moment when Carlos Jr.'s Academy planned this big event where they had sponsors paying them. And because there were sponsors involved, Carlos Jr. wanted one of Rickson's cousins, Regan Machado, to fight him. Rickson naturally didn't want to fight a family member because it went against everything they fought for. They fought to put the family name on top. That didn't involve fighting a family member. But because of some misunderstandings, Rickson ended up fighting his cousin, Regan Machado. Of course, Rickson won. I saw a video of Regan Machado on YouTube, and it's funny because he explained that Rickson at that time, Rickson got stronger as the fight progressed. And naturally, most fighters got more tired as the fight progressed, and Rickson, for some reason that even seems unnatural, got stronger as the fight went on. So as we talked in the previous videos, at this point, Rickson is getting kind of bored from jiu-jitsu because, you are defeating everyone. There's not a single man that can even compete with you and give you a good fight that you say, damn, I had to sweat to beat him. There was no one who could beat Rickson. As he had no competition, he went to Japan because he had a very good appreciation for Japan. That's where jiu-jitsu began. That there's history there. He went to Japan to talk with this man that had been a fighter in Brazil, Inoki, and he went to talk with him, but Inoki refused to meet Rickson. So Rickson left. He had good memories in Japan, but he didn't do anything at the moment. One important thing in his life is that trip transformed his view of samurais, because I'm gonna summarize like 3 pages of the book. Samurai, he says, are just like servants. They put loyalty above family. They were servants to their masters. They fought so hard because of their loyalty to their master, not because of their family or of something like that. On the battlefield, the samurai had absolute loyalty and courage and were great warriors, but they did not fight for themselves. To me, following someone who you knew was wrong was beyond reason or honor. It was just blind obedience. This also made me reevaluate my view of the samurai. So at this point, Rickson hasn't changed anything. Despite his marriage problems, he hadn't changed his daily routine or anything. So naturally, one day, Kim exploded at me, and all of her resentment for me and her present situation boiled over. After she said some harsh things to me in the heat of the moment, I said, if you're not happy with me here, I'm going to leave at my friend's house. I'll come by to see the kids and I'll give you all the support you need. So him and Kim got separated. Again, this is not a picture from the professional photographer, but this is a picture from Rickson and his first son, Rickson Gracie. So at this point, this chapter ends where things between lucha libre and jiu-jitsu began to get heated. They wanted to see which martial art was better and stronger and just overall better. Rickson wanted to fight in lucha libre. Rickson wanted to challenge or get challenged by the best lucha libre fighter. Instead, he got challenged by this guy named Hugo Duarte. But as Rickson was a champion, he couldn't challenge someone that was below him. So what he did was that he arranged some fight in the beach. Rickson basically beat the out of this guy at the beach. He was a natural, but the guy ended up crying. In my own words, he didn't literally cry, but ended up crying and say, no, it was not fair. I'll read it. He says, we stood up and walked to the ocean to wash off the blood and sand. Hugo turned to me and said, I'm not happy. I was winning until your relatives started kicking me on the ground and throwing sand in my eyes. Typical Gracie. They talked to each other to basically arrange another fight. But what ended up happening was that the lucha libre guys and Hugo Duarte, they crashed Rickson's father's academy. But this time they didn't have a code, or they didn't have this just honor. That day the lucha libre guys went armed. They had shirts on their faces covering them up. They had broken bottles in their arms. They were like a f***ing gang. Rickson went there in his underwear because he was sleeping. He went fast. He went to Hugo. Basically, they had their fight. Again, he beat the shit out of this guy in his school. But just before they ended up fighting, Rickson's younger brother, Rickson Gracie, started to fight with this Eugenio Tadeo fighter. So, I mean, it was messed up. There was a huge crowd. It was a mess. It was like everyone was fighting each other. So the police came, they fired one shot in the air. Nobody did. So one of the other police officers took out his gun and began firing a lot of shots. I think it was an automatic weapon. And it's funny because just as we were shaking hands, my younger brother Euler started to fight with Eugenio Tadeo. As we all turned our attention to their fight, a police car pulled up. The cops couldn't get through the crowd, so one of them shot his handgun in the air. Still, nobody moved. Then the first cop's partner, a scrawny guy with a thick mustache, blasted his automatic rifle, a bullet from which ricocheted off a building and hit someone in the leg. Finally, Euler and Eugenio stopped fighting and the crowd scattered. As people tried to get away, the little cop walked to the center of the patio, smiled and yelled, "Who's a tough guy now?" I thought it funny that the smallest cop was not afraid of anything. That's basically the end of the chapter. Rickson says that after that incident, he started to see the Lucha Libre Academy and the Lucha Libre guys different because their rivalry made each other better. Their rivalry made Jiu-Jitsu better, made him better, and I guess made them better. So that's why the chapter is made Steel Sharpens Steel, because I guess he's honoring Lucha Libre and saying they are a very solid martial art too. If it can even be called a martial art, because in Lucha Libre, everything goes, you know, there's no rules. So if there's no rule, how can you be a martial art? You know what I mean? I don't know. So guys, let me know what you think in the comments, please. I really appreciate everything you guys have to say. Next chapter is coming to America. So I'll see you in the next chapter. Bye.